This is Trash Panda Publishing. Thank you for joining our podcast, where raccoons talk about books and publishing, and of course, anything related to raccoons. Hi, I'm your host, David James. You know, it's been like 2 or 3 weeks since we've recorded, and I miss recording. Part of it has been because I've been super busy and traveling, and I think I wasn't sick, so I was just basically busy. I think about the podcast all the time, and I'm back. We have a few pieces of news today, and then we are going to read a chapter from a new author. Well, not a new author, but a new author to the show. And a couple pieces of news. So, first of all, PAX East, which is a conference that I'm going to be going to, is 3 weeks away. It's in Boston. If you're going to be in the Boston area on March, I think it's 26th, 27th, 28th, and 29th, that's a Thursday through Sunday. It's at the Boston Convention Center. I will be there with 3 of my friends at booth TT16. TT stands for Tabletop Room. That's the huge auditorium where they will have tons of tables set up for gaming, both role-playing, card gaming like Pokemon, Magic, stuff like that, and actual board games like, wouldn't be Monopoly, but games that physically have boards and tokens and things like that, probably more on the fantasy side. Like Lord of the Rings does have a board game. There's themed games like Marvel has board games. I'm sure those games will be there. Anyways, that's where we are. And the reason for that is because, first of all, that room is open until midnight. And number 2, the people who are playing these games are potentially and most likely the ones who would be interested in reading Escala's Wish. And number 3, I am a gamer. And if nobody comes to the booth, we're just going to shut it down and go sit at a table and play our own games. So that is where we'll be in like 3 weeks. Also, I have been working on with Mercy, who has appeared on the show a couple of times, a new cover for Escala's Wish, one that is 100% pure, meaning there's no AI involved. It's going to be a simplistic cover, a more, how would I describe it? Minimalist cover, I guess is the right word. It's going to be white background, and it has a crown to reflect the Crown of Dreams, which is an artifact in the book. And Mercy has done a very nice job wrapping vines around the crown, and the vines represent, the Fey realm, and it gives it sort of that Fey / feminine vibe, but not quite feminine, or not overly feminine. And the crown, of course, is gold, and it has beautiful jewels in it. It looks quite nice. And then in blue, I love blue. Blue beveled letters, it says Escala's Wish on a white field, which is the background behind that. It looks beautiful. Then on the back, it has sort of that same vine covers the back, and it's been, how would I say, washed out a little bit, so the text of the back, the blurb of the book, fits nicely on the back. One of the reasons we're redoing this, besides getting away from AI, is, by the way, the woman on the front of my book is not AI. She is an actual human being, but obviously the stuff on the back, there is no castle like that or a crossing. The person who made that did finally admit that there was some AI elements in there. And there was one person who accused me of using AI on the cover, and they're right. And that annoys me because I specifically went to an artist or a company to not use AI because I knew you would get toasted. I could just do it. I could have done it myself in ChatGPT. And to be honest, I did try at the beginning. I wanted to see if I could make my own cover. It looked okay, but it was clearly AI, and I knew I would get torched, so I didn't do that. Anyways, on the back, I'm now that I've got some reviews from Kirkus and Book Life and Forward Clarion, I actually have what's called pull quotes, which will go on the back now, besides just the blurb, which are, not endorsements, but they are reviews. It's what you would see like on the back of a John Grisham book or a Stephen King book, like a quote from the New York Times or a quote from USA Today, things like that. I have those now, and they're good. So they're going to go on the back. Also, inside the book, Inevitably, when you read your own work, you cringe at the stuff you've written. At least I do, and I have been polishing it up and rewriting some of the scenes to make them flow a little bit better, cut out some unnecessary words, add some stuff that was missing. Not that doesn't change the story, but people have said to me, friends of mine have been like, well, wait a minute, there's something that happens in this scene that we didn't know she was carrying it. So I have to add a line earlier in the book where she picks it up. Or, for example, Jonathan, who is killed in chapter 3, he's laying there on the ground. It might be chapter 12 or 11. And I say once that it gets his eyes closed. And then like two paragraphs later, I say he gets his eyes closed. Well, he wouldn't need to have his eyes closed a second time. They were already closed. It's things like that where continuity issues. So I'm fixing those things. And I'm going to add a chapter, at least one. There was a chapter that was cut out during the editing. It was about bees. And there's a line in the book, I think it's chapter 31, where Wigforth is interviewing Escala to try to confirm that she's Fae. And Harper says that she had negotiated a treaty with bees. And it sounds funny on the surface. And if you've read the book, you're like, well, that's probably some crazy thing she would have done. Well, there's actually a chapter that was about that, but it got cut out. The editor had cut that out because the book was ridiculously long. It is already long, but I'm going to put it back in for the second edition. So that's going to come out. I don't know when, April, May, something like that. So that's that news. The audiobook came out about a week ago on February 27th. I have done no advertising or marketing for it. I don't know why. I've been busy, and I honestly don't know the best way to market it. I suppose I could go back to the Facebook ads, but to do an audiobook, you need, I would think you would want to market like a clip of it, right? Like a 15 or 30-second clip. And I have the entire audiobook saved by chapters, so it's not that hard to do. But I haven't really put any thought into, okay, what chapters would I use? And I need to do that. But anyways, I've already sold 15 copies in a week with no advertising, which is phenomenal. Other than me just telling people that the audiobook is out. And I know there have been some people waiting for it, that they basically say that, a book of this size is much easier to digest when they're driving or on the treadmill or something. And so there are people waiting for it. Amazon does give me 50 codes for free to hand out. I don't know why they do this, 25 for US Audible customers. And evidently there's a different server if you're in the UK. And so I have 25 codes for UK Audible server, which I guess is audible.uk. I wish I would have had a choice. I would have loved to have all 100 in the US, but I don't. And I'm almost out of the US codes for the Audible one. There's a website called freeaudiobooks.com. That's where my book is posted. I think there's 3 US codes left, and there are all 25 UK codes left because I don't really know anybody in the UK. That's where I posted the book there. By the way, if you want to listen to audiobooks for free, you can go grab them there. The website is called, let me just give it to you again. It is called Free Audiobooks, or Free Audiobook, singular, freeaudiobookcodes.com. I'll put that link in the description. To open an account is free, and there is like every genre you could possibly imagine, and you can check it out. You can get a code and listen to the book. The people who are posting the books do want reviews, so that's sort of the trade. Listen to my book for free, and please write a review. Now, they can't tell you what kind of review to write, but that's the trade. So, for example, I'm looking right now. Let's say that you like mysteries. There's 1,400 mysteries posted right now on this website. Let me just see how many are available and how many US code ones do we have left. There is a ton. I'm just scrolling through here. We've got, it's not sorted by author's name, so I can't tell if these people are famous or not, but some of the book covers look really interesting. And there is still 1,400 codes available. Let's say that you like Westerns. There's 116 of those. If you like urban fantasy, there's 190 of those. If you like women's fiction, there's 31 of those. If you like what I write, which is romantasy, that actually is a category. And there's 399 of those. And if you look at it, I'm number one on the list. I don't know if it's based off of who posted last, but my book shows up right at the top of the list. And if you just like regular fantasy, there's 856 of those. If you are a little bit into the dirty stuff, there's erotica categories, 700 of those. There's biographies, 300 plus of those. There's comedy books. There's classics. How could you have a classic at this stage? Somebody rewrote The Great Gatsby. I don't understand that. How could you rewrite that? I want to just listen to that. Well, there's no codes available. Someone's already checked all the code. Oh, you know what? Maybe what they're doing is they took The Great Gatsby and reenacted it with voice acting. I bet you that's what it is. Anyways, the website again is free, audiobookcodes.com. And if you are listening and you're in the UK, you can grab my book. And if you are one of the 3 people listening, well, there are 3 codes left in the US. I'm hoping there's more than 3 people listening here. All right, next news. Since the last podcast, I was given the Mom's Choice Award, the Gold Edition, for Escala's Wish, which is fantastic. Now, what does that mean? For those of you who are older than 40, you might remember the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval, which was something. Good Housekeeping was a magazine, and my grandmother subscribed to it. I'm going to stereotype here because I don't know for certain, but it seemed to be aimed at housewives, primarily women, of course. Well, maybe not of course, but generally I think that was the audience. And it covered pretty much anything that would happen inside your house, whether it be cleaning, food, furniture, vacuums, whatever. And they reviewed products. And if you got the Good Housekeeping stamp of approval, it meant that the magazine felt that whatever you were doing, whatever product you had, service, whatever, it was, A-OK. It had met their criteria. And people relied on that. Companies that were able to get that stamp would put it all over their products, and it became something that you could just kind of trust. I don't know if the Good Housekeeping magazine is still around or if the Good Housekeeping seal of approval is still even used. I haven't heard about it in a long time. But the Mom's Choice Award is similar, except it's for books. And it's like books and literature and toys and things like that. And it is something that many families that are looking for some sort of test on quality and also appropriateness for children and teenagers do look at whether or not something has the Mom's Choice Award. And what Mom's Choice Award is basically screening, in this case, books, to make certain that it doesn't have, inappropriate themes for children. And, just to be frank, inappropriate themes would be like, overly sexual content and bad words, just to be frank, which my book doesn't have either. And there's no sex and there is no cursing. There are jokes and there is sarcasm and there's romance and there's jokes about romance, but it's clean fun. And it is, I think there's one kiss in the book, which led to deaths actually. And then in the rest of the book, there is the desire to kiss, but they can't because it's forbidden. And at the end, there is 2 marriages. I bet that's a spoiler. I shouldn't have said that. And I guess the only thing that you would consider out of the tradition, if you will, would be a child, 2 children that were born out of wedlock, which is, very common in today's society. Certainly not common back in the 20s. That would have not been common, but it is today. Well, anyways, Mom's Choice Awards gave me the gold stamp. Now they have 4 categories. You can just get the mom stamp of approval, which means you had appropriately written something that was like not smut or whatever, and just sort of sneak in. But then if it's good quality, you can get ranked bronze, silver, gold, like the Olympics. And getting gold is a pretty special thing because you go on their website in their catalog. So if there's anyone who really is using Mom's Choice to buy gifts for teenagers, or even adults in their life, and there are homeschoolers, for example. I know that there are many homeschooling groups that use Mom's Choice to pick curriculum. Now, mine's not a textbook, but it could be used to as a summer reading book because it's fun and it's something that now has a new audience because it's been passed. I've wondered whether this will hurt me from the perspective of, okay, you have a Mom's Choice Award on it. Could it go the other direction? Someone going, well, this thing has got to be clean, must be boring, so I'm not going to buy this. I don't know, and I really don't care because the book, I wanted to write a book that would not embarrass me if I gave it to my daughter, who's now 20, she'll be 21 later this year. But I also wanted to write a book that you could give to your 12-year-old daughter and not be embarrassed. So the fact that it has a Mom's Choice Award just makes me feel great because I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish from a content perspective. The fact that it's gold means that they thought that the quality of the writing was good. Also like that too. So that's the pieces of news today. We do have a book to read, or a chapter to read. It is from Justin Hulford. Justin is an author who, let's see how many books he's written. Oh, he's got a number of books up on Amazon. Let's count them here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books. One of them just jumps at me. It says My Father's Feet, and there's a picture of his dad's feet that has a farmer's tan. So his dad's, the feet are barefoot, and it shows his father's legs, which are suntan, but his father's feet are not, because his father must have been wearing socks. I don't know what this book's about, but it is on Kindle Unlimited, and the title and the pictures just make me want to wonder what's going on there. I'm going to guess that it's about his father who was either constantly outside, either for pleasure, maybe he played golf or did a ton of yard work, or hiked. I suspect this is a love letter from Justin to his father about, I hope it is anyways, as opposed to some sort of I hate you, Dad letter. But who knows? Anyways, he wrote, that's not the book we're reading today. The book that chapter we're reading today is from a book that he wrote called The Book Was Passed to a Girl. That's the title of the book. But let's go back to Justin and go over his bio. What I'm looking at is his bio on Amazon. And it says, I've always enjoyed writing compositions in English language lessons. Ever since then, my writing has grown and grown. I started with small formats, such as short magazine pieces and poetry, before moving on to grander things. This included a lot of fantasy, particular gaming. Well, let's stop right there. Justin, you were right in my world because obviously I write fantasy and I play role-playing games. I didn't know that about you. Aside from a few throwaway pieces in magazines like Dragon and White Dwarf, all right, we need to stop right there. Dragon is not published anymore. And I think White Dwarf actually still is. Dragon was a magazine that started in the late 70s, early 80s. It was a magazine written about Dungeons and Dragons, and I still have copies of that thing. I didn't realize you wrote for that, Justin. Even if you just wrote 2 or 3 pieces, that's pretty darn cool, because Dungeons and Dragons for the longest time, not so much today, but for the longest time, was the premier role-playing game in the world. For years, decades. And everybody who fancied themselves as a module writer, a novel writer in this genre, wanted to write for Dragon. It would be like the equivalent of writing for the New York Times. So well done, Justin. Maybe you could tell us which dungeon number you wrote for. I have every single one of them on PDF. I'll read that story on the air here if you tell us which one. So that's fantastic that he wrote for that. Since then, he has been a key contributor to printed magazines called Corduroy, which is a slightly tongue-in-cheek articles that might interest a fictional country gentleman. He wrote for Power Play, which is a CD and live reviews, as well as interviews with about rock and roll and metal music. wow, I've not heard of that magazine, but have you met famous rock stars? We should have you come on the show, Justin. You have to be a guest. When we publish this thing, I'm going to message you on Facebook saying, please, please, please come on here. Talk about Dragon with us. Talk about White Dwarf. And talk about who you have met in the rock and roll industry. He's also been a main contributor on a website called Rocketologist, which is a monthly online magazine also about rock. He has his own website and even a radio show. Well, can I be a guest on your show, please? And I'm not kidding. He loves writing on anything, and he has all kinds of writing projects. He's now completed 3 novels and 4 nonfiction books. Well, I assume that Your Father's Feet is one of the nonfiction books. What an interesting background, Justin. Well, thank you so much for sending in your chapter 3, I think, from the book. The book was passed to a girl. Let me get it open here. And he also sent me a little summary about what the book is about. I think I'll read that first, before we read the chapters, so it has some context of what we're reading. The book was passed to a girl is about inner strength. The bookish teenager Emily discovers a mysterious book that vaguely predicts the future, but when she tries to find the shop again, she discovers it's been missing for years. With her feisty friend Brand, she embarks on a journey of self-discovery, weaving a dangerous path through the lives of a host of odd characters. The colorful resident of a gloomy wine bar that covets the book, the polished dandy who plays one off against the other, and the giant monster of a man seeking out his own body parts are just the start. As Emily gets drawn in deeper, she must find strength and resolve, digging deeper and deeper as she finds out who to trust. As the journey goes on, it becomes increasingly more dangerous for all, including the detective trying to solve a run of vicious murders, before he can become a part of the narrative himself. The initial inspiration was to create a screenplay for Channel 4. It was shortlisted but not progressed, but it was clear that there was a story to be found, drawing on personal interest in the aspects of fantasy, mystery, crime, and thrillers, and wanting to place the whole thing in London that is both recognizable and mysterious. The story was formed. A puzzle underpins the story, allowing the reader to try and work out what's happening and then try to predict the outcome. The key point is the perspective of a teenage girl, at first vulnerable and at risk to dangers that she can't recognize, but then growing with every step. It demonstrates that those who think that they have the power may actually be vulnerable themselves. Initially, it was written as a screenplay. Let me just read that again. Initially, it was written with the late teenage young adult feel to it, but it was subsequently pushed to a slightly older audience. This is very much a story to tell through research and experience I've combined with the real fantastical, drawing on the elements of folklore and combining them into a powerful, puzzling hunt for answers. Well, this book sounds quite interesting. And I'm sorry my dog was barking in the background. That Billy, once again, has fallen down the well. Okay, so actually, he's given us 3 chapters because they're all really short. So the whole thing he's given us is only 12 pages, so each chapter is about 4 pages. So we're going to read 3 chapters, starting with chapter 1. Chapter 1. Let me just zoom in because my eyes are old, my ears are weak. The voice was so many things at once as it called her name. There was melancholy running through it, sad enough to crush the happiest of times. There was no hope. Instead, it sucked the joy from anyone that heard it. It sucked the joy from her. Emily! There it was again. She couldn't ignore it, no matter how hard she tried. It was yearning, seeking approval. It was the only thing she could hear. Emily desperately tried to close her mind to it as it half stung, half whispered her name, but it penetrated any barrier she created. "Emily!" The voice was desperate, solitary, alone. It smothered her like an early morning fog rolling in from the sea, enveloping any sense of self. She looked down to the familiar razor blade, ready to mark herself again. The pain all that could defend her. "Emily!" shouted her mother. The new voice, a real voice, cut through the fog and startled her for a moment. "Emily, we're leaving in 5. The harsh, whispering voice suddenly gone, Emily rolled her sleeve back down and put the blade back in the safety of its special bag before shouting back to her mother that she was on her way. They were about to embark on an annual seaside trip that she really had no desire to join. But it was happening yet again, a ritual that her stepfather Dave had brought into her life when he had arrived on the scene 10 years before. He had spent a week of every year. He had been born in one of those static caravans close to Chelsea, and he seemed determined to help Emily share this experience. All he could hope was that Bran would be there again, Emily's beacon of hope, her escape. She had met Bran when she was 12. The two of them were the same age. Bran stayed there from one of the small number of families that lived permanently on the site, and Bran knew all the good things to do, and the bad ones. Without her, Emily didn't think she could get through another week. She grabbed her bag and checked her sleeve was definitely back in position. She dared not let her mother or Dave see the cuts, let alone the small pentagram tattooed further up her arm. Emily hastily scanned the room one more time, then headed down. They were out in the car straight away, an anonymous saloon. Dave drove, of course, a creature of manly habit despite his youth compared with her mother. Not that you'd know, as she betrayed her punkish past with dyed blonde hair, pushed up high, that dared not touch a fishnet top that she wore over a black bra. Bright red lipstick matched her leather skirt as she gripped onto the past as tightly as she could. He wore a pastel polo shirt and slacks and somehow managed to look too old for jeans. A pipe and slippers next. They pulled off the driveway and left their quiet side street and were turning onto the main road when Emily remembered the handful of books she left on the side. "Sorry, no," stated Dave. "The traffic's bad enough as it is. We're not going back." "There it is, Emily," added her mother, sounding more like the petulant older sibling than a parent. "But I need the books," she pleaded. "The way the roads have been," concluded Dave, tapping the stat nav to emphasize the expected time of arrival. "We'll get you something down there," her mother added, suddenly trying to reconcile. The negotiations over, if they ever started, Emily slumped into a sulking huddle. The seatbelt suddenly felt like it was rubbing in an odd position, and she just stared out the window as the clash of the Ramones or something else she hated began playing on the car radio. Dave just kept going as their mundane world slipped by. A young woman pushed a buggy, dark green material with chrome fittings, an infant silent within. 3 lads about Emily's age loitered at a bus stop, as an old woman felt obligated to stand outside, scowling at them from within her bright collage. And then there was the man. He was tall, only his face properly visible. He wore a long brown overcoat, topping it off with browner leather gloves and a hat, perhaps a trilby or something similar. That was brown too, with an inch-wide brim in black running just above the rim. All the others were just going about their day, oblivious of Emily's tortured journey to the caravan. But the man stared straight at her. He made eye contact as they passed, He stood still, but turned his head to keep her in sight. He turned to look back, her view obscured by the heating wires in the rear glass and the window corners full of grime that had escaped the wipers and Dave's sponge. The man steadily disappeared from sight as they continued on, but she knew he'd been staring all the time. At her, she was sure. Emily said nothing, but simply sat back down in her seat, subconsciously readjusting the left sleeve that hid everything. She could have sworn that the pentagram was burning just a little, but then that might just be because it was so new. Spent the rest of the journey thinking about the way he stared, his look as penetrating as the voice that she often heard. But whilst the voice surrounded Emily and left her with no easy escape, it was familiar and oddly comforting in its chilled regularity. The man was different. He looked at her as if he knew her or knew something about her. His eyes cut to her inner self, and he couldn't look like he could ever offer comfort. That sulk off. There wasn't much chance of that. Emily hadn't wanted to go to the caravan at all, and without her books, she was bereft. "Dave, run her down to the shops, will you?" continued her mother. "But I was going to the clubhouse to see who's around." "Come on, it won't take long. Just pop into town so she can get a book." Their journey down was silent. She hadn't known her real father. He had left when she was very young. But there was something about Dave she just didn't like. He was a lot younger than her mother, and way too close to her own age, but somehow he lived like an old man. The things he did, the people he knew, the clothes he wore, he was an alien. Her mother, who always insisted that Emily call him Dad, but to her, he was always going to be Dave, dull Dave. She made the point of always calling him Dave, and her mother regularly corrected her. "Right over here. I'll be over here," said Dave, stopping the car outside the old-fashioned-looking bookshop. "I'll see you in 10 minutes. Before she could protest about the decrepit state of the shop, he thrust a 5-pound note in her hand and then skipped across the road to a betting shop. With no one to protest that she'd been even bothered rolling her eyes, but instead walked into the door of the bookshop. It was the last of but one shop of the terrace, sandwiched between a newsagent and a pizza place. The door was made of faded, unpainted wood, and a yellowing white sign hung from frayed string to declare that it was open. She looked in the windows, and the old books were old, uninteresting, and surrounded by dead blue bottles. They were the lucky ones. She pushed the door open, and the small bell jingled enthusiastically, a sharp little tone that startled her for a second. Within, there were bookcases and shelves everywhere, like a disused, cluttered library. Some of them books were presented as you would expect, whilst others were on their sides on top of the cases. There were more on the various old wooden tables that were scattered around, and occasionally one was left open as if a reader had suddenly rushed away somewhere more interesting. There was a slight tingle in the air as the sun streamed through the windows that were high on the walls, and the beams energized the dust. "Can I help you?" Emily wheeled around to find a man behind the counter. She hadn't noticed him before, and she wondered if he had just blended in. He wore a white shirt with thinned, checked lines, obscured by green tank top. Old-fashioned black frames suited him perfectly, as his thinning hair completed his character. Behind him sat a till, an ancient-looking thing that had big keys. In the display part was a tab that said, "No sale." "Where did you come from?" she asked. "Originally Sussex, but today, the back room." "I'm looking for a book." "Obviously. A mystery, perhaps? Something on the occult?" "Not really. I'm planning on doing the history of uni. I forgot to bring mine with me." He smiled at her gently, and just as it started to be awkward, he added, "I think I have your book over here." He reached under the counter and pulled out a large, leather-bound book, the sort of thing that you might call a tome. The leather was luxurious and red, and the title obscured by hand. It appeared to be gold letters. "What is it?" asked Emily. He handed it across to her. Opening it as he did so, it weighed less than she was expecting. "Why don't you take a look?" She read a dedication page that said, "Every word for the future." She turned to the first proper page. The opening line was presented like a heading. August 12th, 1736. The book was started. She ran her finger down the page and stopped at the next thing that stood out. April 16th, 1746. The Battle of Culloden. Underneath that line was some more text. Just a few lines that described the defeat of Bonnie Prince Charlie. A little bit further on was another single-line entry against a date. The book was passed to a man. "Well, that's a bit odd," she said, looking up from the book for the first time. But he'd gone. "Hello?" She asked the empty room and noticed that the till register now said £5. She gathered up the book and left Dave's note on the counter and rushed out. Dave was outside walking back to the car as she did so, and for once she was almost pleased to see him. They left then, a journey just as silent as the one there. The whole thing in the shop had fazed her a little, so that she didn't notice the man in the long brown coat. He stood next to the betting shop, and he watched them get back in the car, and he watched them drive away, and then he followed. Chapter 3. Later that afternoon, Emily was in the caravan alone. Dave had gone to the clubhouse, and her mother had followed once the veg for tonight's dinner had been prepped. She ran around after him, and that sickened Emily. Whatever Dave wanted, he got, and her own mother acted like she was his mother half the time. There was a knock at the door, and Emily was delighted to find it was Bran. She'd met her the first time they'd come to the caravan, and she was all that kept her sane on these trips. "I can't believe you haven't been around," accused Bran with a smile. I didn't think you'd be in yet." "Well, I'm here," replied Bran as they hugged. They went to the caravan, and Bran slumped onto the end of the couch. "You didn't ever put them down?" she said, pointing at the large book and pulling a face. "Oh, this one's a different one. It's written in a really strange way." Bran shuffled along the couch and grabbed the large book. She flicked the pages over and went to the back end papers. "I was always reading the end first. It saves time if you don't like it." "It's a history book. It doesn't have an ending." "Did Daddy buy it?" "It's not funny." "What is it?" asked Bran, properly interested. "I think it's called a gazetteer." "Catchy, but it looks expensive." "It was only a $5. "It looks worth more," she added for a few moments before adding, "I thought you said it was old." "It is." "Well, why was it only on the news yesterday?" Emily leant across and took the book back from Bran. She read the last entry, but one entry, the heading followed a few lines of text. It was about an earthquake that happened a couple days before. "Oh, no. Just an earthquake, Emily." "No, it's the next entry." She was shaken, and her face made it clear to Bran that she had just read something else. "It's today's date, and it says, 'The book was passed to a girl.'" "Where'd you get this?" "The old bookshop in town." "I don't know it." "Well, you wouldn't, would you?" "No, I mean there isn't a bookshop there. The nearest is in Chichester." It was a 20-minute walk into town, and they decided to head down and speak to the bookshop owner straight away. "Are you sure that's the betting shop?" asked Bran. "Of course I am. It's not London. There's only one." "Well, it can't be." It had to be. There was the betting shop, the newsagent at the end of the terrace, and the pizza place a couple of doors down. But sat in between them was a charity shop, and on one side of the door the window display had a lemon-colored dress that was neatly arranged on a mannequin. And on the other side of the selection was ugly ornaments, the sort that you might throw wooden balls at if you were visiting the side stalls for a village fete. Emily entered the shop, the bell familiar as it tingled a greeting. But that was all that was familiar. She waited a moment as the elderly volunteer served someone and then got her chance. "Excuse me, I'm looking for a bookshop," stated Emily. "Oh, we've got books, dear, just over there in the corner." The woman behind the counter pointed further into the shop. "No, I mean here. A bookshop here." "No, this is a charity shop." "Oh, I know that, but there was a bookshop here." "Is something wrong, Daphne?" A second woman, much younger, appeared from the back room. She was clutching a vase in the shape of a fish and walked towards them. "This girl wants a book." "No, I don't," interrupted Emily. "There was a bookshop here, in this shop." "Oh, that was years ago. Did someone send you?" asked the younger woman. "No, I wanted to visit the shop." "Ah, I get it. I meant, did someone send you down? Your granddad or someone?" "No." "Oh, I thought it might be been someone who knew Mr. Jenkins. He died not long after he went to the home. But that was years ago." 1978, added Daphne. "That was the year after the Jubilee. The lovely hot day for the Queen, that one. I made a Victorian sponge." "The silver one?" clarified the younger woman. "No, the strawberry," answered Daphne. And then they laughed about the mix-up, but Emily was already away. She ran out of the shop and grabbed hold of Bran's hand, kept running as she did so. "What happened?" asked Bran, their speed of their running throwing her natural curls into disarray. "There's something strange." "Well, tell me." "The shop, it's been gone 40 years or more." Bran slowed down and made Emily stop. "What?" 40 years. The woman said it had been shut 40 years ago when the owner went into a home." "But you were there this morning." "I know. It doesn't make any sense." They walked on then, Emily not really knowing why she had decided to run before. They were back at the park soon enough, and as they approached the caravan, they saw a police patrol car parked next to it. Blue and white tape fluttered in the light breeze that was coming off the sea as the thin strand of plastic tried to block the path between the caravan and the ones next to it. Then, as the two kept walking, the rear door of the patrol car suddenly opened and their mother got out. She ran towards Emily, tears rolling down her face, and she embraced her hard as she might never let go. "Mom, what happened?" "There was a man in the caravan when we came back from the pub." "What?" Her mother released the hug, but held onto Emily's hands still. "We came back and there was a man. He was going through the stuff and Dad ran over. The man attacked him, Emily. He hit him and then stabbed him." Her tears started up again. "He's dead, Emily." "Dad?" "Yes, Dad. I don't know what to do." What happened? Where's the man?" asked Emily. "I don't know. He ran away." One of the police officers stood behind her mother now. "I need to go back and give a statement. Can you stay with Brandon until I back later?" "Of course she can," reassured Bran. "What did he look like, Mom? The man? What did he look like?" "I don't know. He was tall, I suppose. He was wearing a long brown coat and a hat and a brown and leather gloves," concluded Emily. Yes. How did you know that?" "I saw him this morning near home." "What?" Her mother tightened her grip on Emily's hand. "Go with the police, Mom. I'll be fine until later." If she hadn't been in such a state of shock, her mother might have collected her thoughts and asked Emily more. But the police officer put a reassuring hand on her shoulder just at the right moment, and the questions disappeared in her head. Went back to the police car, and they drove away. Another officer stayed behind to keep an eye on the scene until others could arrive. Emily grabbed Bran by the hand once more, and they ran to her friend's house. "How long do you think they're going to be with your mom?" "Doesn't matter," replied Emily. "Why not?" "I'm getting out of here right now," she said, a hint of defiance in her voice. "What? Where are you going?" "I don't know, but I'm not waiting here for that man to find me." Bran paused a moment, processing how our mundane morning had rapidly changed before adding, "Well, I'm coming with you." "Are you sure?" Bran nodded. "Do you think he's after the book?" "I don't know, but there's something weird going on. Probably." "But do you reckon you saw him this morning before you even had the book?" "I know, but then I also bought it from the shop that's been closed for 40 years. You remember the last entry, don't you?" She pulled the book out of her bag and opened it quickly, turning to the last page. But there was now a new entry against today's date. Earl went to Charing Cross. Well, that ends chapter 3. This is going to be interesting. The book is either telling them what to do or recording, sort of predicting the future. Is the man in the coat the Mr. Jenkins and he wants his book back? Who was the man in the store if it wasn't Mr. Jenkins? Very interesting book here, Justin. You have to come on the show and talk to us about all of your writings, your writings for Dragon, your rock and roll stuff, your podcast. Sounds great. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I'm going to drop a link in the podcast. Please check out Justin's various books. I think most of them are on Kindle Unlimited. And leave a review. It's gold for those of us who are authors. And now you know what is next. The Crimson and Ava Show. Welcome to the Crimson and Ava Show, starring Crimson Jack Acorn III and Ava Honeysuckle. Today, Crimson reflects on nearly burning down the forest. Well, that didn't go very well. I'm not really a good chef, and honestly, I'm kind of humbled and embarrassed. Ava never showed up, and that's probably a good thing. You know, probably should just move on with my life. Ava is probably too good for me. And that hurts. I've been for so long trying to convince myself that I was in her league. And I'm not. This is kind of a downer of a show, I know. But that's why shows have part 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s, because you want to come back next time to find out, do I recover? Or do I end up in counseling with a lot of medicine? I don't know. I don't have health insurance, so there's probably no counseling in my future. I do know a guy who sells drugs, so that could happen, but not likely. And whiskey, it shivers me timbers, and I'm not a pirate, so that's not happening either. And perhaps I just suck it up and pull up the old bootstraps and talk to this new raccoon named Miss Cassidy Vance. She's wild. She doesn't seem to be interested in the Big Apple, but she also doesn't seem to be interested in me either. But she likes adventure, and that's something I could do, take my mind off Ava, is to run into town and break into places and eat snacks. You know, to gorge myself so I don't think about Ava. I think I'm going to go ask Miss Cassidy Vance if maybe she wants to go do that. To go do some mischief. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. All right. I'm feeling better already. Well, find out next time on the Crimson Ava Show, and perhaps the Crimson Ava and Miss Cassidy Vance Show, whether Crimson can convince Miss Cassidy Vance that the two of them should do mischief together by breaking into humans, establishments, businesses, and houses. Find out next time. on Crimson Jack Acorn and the Ava Honeysuckle Show. I want to thank you for joining us on the Trash Panda Publishing podcast. Tell your friends about this, please. Let other people know that independent podcasts are out there and they're a lot of fun. Until next time, stay curious.
Thanks for listening to Trash Panda Publishing Podcasts. And like all raccoons, stay curious.